My daily day's struggle. Anya woke with familiar dread. Another day facing the daily day's struggle. English words swirled, yet none formed coherent sentences. Her tongue felt heavy, a lead weight in her mouth, preventing the smooth flow of conversation she desperately craved. The thought of speaking to strangers was terrifying, a constant nagging fear. She sighed, her dream of fluency distant. How to talk to anyone in English felt like an insurmountable mountain. Each encounter felt like an interrogation, her mind freezing, words vanishing. She practiced silently alone, but the real world presented a different challenge entirely. The silence that followed her attempts was always deafening, filled with her own unspoken anxieties. It was a daily battle. She knew why reading is so important. Books offered solace, a quiet escape where words flowed freely. Yet, even there, comprehension sometimes faltered. The joy of a story often vanished amidst unknown vocabulary. She yearned to absorb every nuance, to truly grasp the beauty of English literature. Reading was a foundation she knew she lacked. How to learn words became a desperate quest. Flashcards, apps, notebooks. She tried them all. But retention was fleeting, words slipping away like sand through her fingers. The sheer volume felt overwhelming, an endless ocean of new vocabulary. Each day brought new words, but old ones faded. It was a frustrating cycle. Her English study plan for talking was rudimentary at best, mostly passive listening. She understood the need for active practice, yet hesitated. The fear of making mistakes paralyzed her. She needed a structured approach, a clear path forward, something beyond just hope. A real plan felt crucial for any progress. Why you must read English echoed in her mind. Every article, every sign, every message was a potential learning opportunity. She knew reading opened doors, not just to vocabulary but to cultural understanding. It was a non-negotiable step on her journey. Without it, her progress would undoubtedly stagnate. Reading was the silent teacher. One evening, after a particularly embarrassing exchange, Anya felt a fierce resolve ignite. This struggle could not define her. She needed a new approach, something radical. The usual methods clearly weren't working effectively enough. Her frustration finally morphed into determination. This was the turning point she desperately needed. She started with "Let me tell you" talking tips she found online. The first tip was simple yet profound. Embrace mistakes. They weren't failures but stepping stones. This shift in mindset was revolutionary for her. The pressure began to lift ever so slightly, making room for actual practice. It was a revelation. Her English study plan for talking began to take shape. She allocated specific times not just for grammar but for active speaking practice. Even if it was just uttering random phrases. Consistency became her new mantra, a deliberate choice. This was no longer passive learning, but an active pursuit of fluency. To improve your fluency, she learned, wasn't just about vocabulary. It was about connection, flow, and confidence. She began listening more actively to native speakers, mimicking their intonation. This subtle shift in focus brought immediate, albeit small, improvements to her natural rhythm. Fluency felt less like a distant dream. How to remember words became less daunting. She adopted spaced repetition, using flashcard apps religiously. But she also started associating words with images or personal experiences. This made learning a more engaging, multisensory process. New words stuck longer becoming part of her active vocabulary. The frustration lessened significantly. The most uncomfortable, yet effective tip was how to talk at home to yourself. Initially, it felt absurd speaking aloud to an empty room, but she persevered, narrating her day, describing objects, even holding imaginary conversations. This practice built muscle memory for her tongue and mind. It was transformative. Her confidence grew with each solitary conversation. The fear of sounding foolish diminished as she realized no one was listening anyway. This safe space allowed her to experiment with pronunciation and grammar, without judgment. It was her secret training ground, preparing her for the real world. Self-talk became empowering. She revisited why reading is so important with renewed vigor. This time she focused not just on understanding, but on internalizing sentence structures and common phrases. She read aloud sometimes, connecting the written word to spoken rhythm. Reading became an active vocal exercise, not just a silent one. Her English study plan for talking now included a daily reading component. Short articles, blog posts, anything accessible. She didn't strive for perfect comprehension, but for exposure. The goal was to build familiarity with natural English expressions. This constant immersion was slowly but surely working wonders. Why you must read English became crystal clear. It wasn't just about vocabulary, it was about context. Reading exposed her to how words behaved in different situations. It built her intuitive sense of grammar and appropriate phrasing. This holistic approach accelerated her overall language acquisition journey significantly. She used how to learn words by noting them down in context. Instead of isolated words, she recorded phrases, even entire sentences. This method ensured she understood usage, not just definition. It made the vocabulary acquisition process much more meaningful and effective for her. Words now had a story. Let me tell you, talking tips continued to inspire her. One tip suggested recording herself. Listening back was cringeworthy at first, but incredibly insightful. She identified areas for improvement: pronunciation, hesitation, intonation. This self-assessment was uncomfortable but vital for true progress. It was an objective mirror. The English study plan for talking became a dynamic, evolving strategy. She integrated new tips as she discovered them. Her routine was no longer rigid, but adaptable, responding to her changing needs. This flexibility kept her motivated and engaged, preventing burnout. Learning became an exciting adventure. To improve your fluency, she started seeking out low-stakes speaking opportunities. A quick chat with a shop assistant, ordering coffee, asking for directions. These small victories boosted her confidence immensely. Each successful interaction fueled her desire to speak more, to connect. Progress was no longer abstract. How to remember words involved creating personalized stories or mnemonics. Linking new words to vivid, often humorous images made them stick. She found this creative approach far more effective than rote memorization. Her mind became a playful playground for vocabulary. Learning became a delightful game. Her how to talk at home to yourself sessions grew bolder. She began debating topics, role-playing scenarios. This simulated real-life conversations, preparing her for unpredictable exchanges. The internal monologues became sophisticated dialogues. Her brain was effectively pre-wired for real-world interactions. This consistent practice paid off. The daily day's struggles slowly transformed. The dread lessened, replaced by a quiet determination. She still faced challenges, but her mindset had shifted. They were no longer insurmountable obstacles, but puzzles to solve. Her fear of English was steadily dissolving, replaced by growing confidence. This was true progress. How to talk to anyone in English seemed less daunting now. The internal practice had built a solid foundation. She felt a lightness, a readiness to engage. The words no longer felt trapped. She was slowly but surely bridging the gap between thought and expression. Her voice was finding its strength. Her commitment to why reading is so important deepened. She found articles on topics she genuinely loved. This made reading a pleasure, not a chore. The authentic interest amplified her learning, making vocabulary acquisition feel effortless. Reading became a source of joy and continuous discovery. It was truly immersive. Her English study plan for talking now included listening to podcasts and watching English shows without subtitles. This pushed her comprehension limits. It was challenging but immensely rewarding. She was actively training her ear to distinguish nuances of spoken English. This immersive strategy was vital. Why you must read English echoed her growing understanding. It wasn't just about passive consumption. It was about active engagement. She started summarizing articles in her own words, orally or in writing. This deepened her processing of information. Reading became a springboard for her own expression. How to learn words evolved further. She used context clues more effectively, inferring meanings before resorting to a dictionary. This skill was crucial for real-time comprehension. Her brain was becoming more adept at navigating unknown territory. It was a cognitive leap forward in her learning. The "let me tell you" talking tips about finding language partners resonated. She hesitantly joined an online language exchange group. The initial conversations were nerve-wracking, but she pushed through. It was the first real application of her internal practice. This brave step was a game-changer. To improve your fluency, she focused on reducing filler words and speaking more naturally. The online interactions provided immediate feedback. She learned to pause gracefully, to articulate thoughts clearly. This real-world practice was invaluable, refining her spoken English. Her conversations gained a natural rhythm. How to remember words became a collaborative effort with her language partners. They discussed new vocabulary, used words in various sentences. This active application reinforced learning significantly. Words were no longer just definitions but tools for communication. This social learning was incredibly powerful. How to talk at home to yourself remained a cornerstone. It was her safe space for experimentation, for rehearsing complex ideas before real conversations. This continued private practice solidified her gains and prepared her for increasingly challenging interactions. Her internal dialogue grew richer, more eloquent. Anya felt the shift profoundly. The daily day's struggle was still present, but less burdensome. It was now a dynamic challenge, not a crushing weight. She embraced the journey, understanding that mistakes were part of growth. Her perception of the struggle had truly transformed. This was personal triumph. How to talk to anyone in English became a reality she actively pursued. She initiated conversations, asked questions, shared opinions. The fear was still there, a tiny tremor, but it no longer controlled her. Her confidence radiated, opening doors to new connections. She was finally engaging. She often reflected on why reading is so important. Her expanded vocabulary and improved comprehension were direct results. Reading fueled her conversations, providing topics and insights. It was the constant wellspring of new knowledge and linguistic structures. Reading was her silent, powerful ally. Her English study plane for talking was now a finely tuned machine. It balanced reading, listening, self-talk, and real-world interactions. Each component supported the others synergistically. She had crafted a personalized, effective system. This holistic approach ensured continuous, meaningful progress. Her dedication paid off. Why you must read English became a personal conviction. It was more than learning words. It was about understanding culture, different perspectives. Reading broadened her world, making her a more informed conversationalist. It provided the depth that truly enriched her speaking. Reading was intellectual nourishment. How to learn words became second nature. She observed new words, actively listened for them, and immediately tried to incorporate them. This proactive approach made vocabulary acquisition an organic part of her daily life. Words were no longer abstract entities but living tools. She was mastering them. The let me tell you talking tips she had absorbed were now her own lived experience. The advice about consistency, practice, and embracing mistakes had proven invaluable. She truly understood the wisdom behind each suggestion. These tips were the roadmap to her success. She carried them proudly. To improve your fluency, Anya realized, was an ongoing process. There was no finish line, only continuous refinement. She sought out diverse accents, challenging herself with new listening materials. This commitment to continuous improvement kept her engaged and prevented stagnation. Fluency was a beautiful journey. How to remember words became less about memorization and more about active use. The more she used a word, the more ingrained it became. She actively sought opportunities to deploy new vocabulary. This practical application solidified her knowledge. Words were tools for expressing her growing mind. Even as her confidence soared, how to talk at home to yourself remained a comforting ritual. It was a space for reflection, for processing new experiences, and for rehearsing future conversations. It was her linguistic gym, where she continuously honed her skills. This private practice was her secret weapon. Anya's journey was a testament to perseverance. The daily day's struggle had transformed into a daily joy of discovery. Each conversation was no longer a hurdle but an opportunity. She celebrated small victories, knowing each step contributed to her larger goal. Her transformation was remarkable. She could now genuinely how to talk to anyone in English. The fear had largely dissipated, replaced by genuine curiosity. She approached interactions with openness, eager to learn and to share. Her conversations flowed naturally, reflecting her true personality. She was finally herself in English. Why reading is so important was etched into her very being. It was the silent mentor, constantly expanding her horizons. She read widely from fiction to news, absorbing language organically. Reading had become an indispensable part of her daily routine. It was her endless source of learning. Her English study plane for talking had proven its worth. It wasn't a rigid schedule but a flexible framework. It adapted to her needs, evolving as she progressed. This personalized approach made language learning sustainable and enjoyable. It was a living, breathing guide. She understood why you must read English not just for vocabulary, but for understanding the nuances of expression. It taught her cultural context in idiomatic language. Reading was the deep dive into the soul of the language. It provided the richness she craved. It was truly profound. How to learn words was now an intuitive process, a natural outgrowth of her reading and listening. She picked up words through exposure, reinforced by active use. Learning new vocabulary felt effortless, almost magical. Her brain was wired for language acquisition. It was a beautiful evolution. The let me tell you talking tips she initially sought now felt like common sense. She often found herself offering similar advice to struggling friends. Her journey had equipped her to guide others. She was no longer just a learner but a quiet mentor. Her experience was invaluable. To improve your fluency was no longer a dream but a reality she lived daily. She sought opportunities, embraced challenges, and celebrated progress. Her voice was strong, clear, and confident. The journey was continuous, but the initial struggle had yielded profound results. She was truly fluent. How to remember words became a testament to consistent application. Regular use, coupled with strategic review, ensured words remained active in her memory. She seamlessly integrated new vocabulary into her speech. The frustrating cycle of forgetting was finally broken. Her lexicon grew robustly. And still, how to talk at home to yourself remained a cherished practice. It was her personal space for refining thoughts, for deep processing of new information. It allowed her to experiment, to play with language without any external pressure. It was her secret linguistic sanctuary. The daily day's struggle had transformed into her empowering success story. Anya, once timid, now spoke with newfound grace. Her fluency wasn't perfect, but it was authentic, vibrant. She had truly unlocked her voice. Her journey inspired many. She was a living example. How to talk to anyone in English was now her strength. She initiated conversations, shared laughter, and connected deeply. The world had opened up, filled with possibilities. Her persistence had paid off, turning her biggest fear into her greatest asset. She embraced every interaction. Why reading is so important continued to be her fuel. It provided infinite topics, nuances, and perspectives. Reading deepened her understanding of the world, making her a more engaging conversationalist. It was the silent, powerful engine of her continued linguistic growth. Reading was her constant companion. Her English study plane for talking had led her to unexpected places, connecting her with people globally. She shared her story, offering encouragement. She proved that dedication, coupled with smart strategies, could conquer any language barrier. Her journey was a beacon of hope,